Hey there, all you creepers and reapers. Welcome to another episode of the Femme Fatalities. I'm your co-hostess, Anna, and I'm here with...
Hey, Grieflings and Frightlings, it's Margaret, and boy, do we have a claustrophobic and dreamy cast for you today. Anna, what are we talking about?
That's right, get your latex scuba suits ready and make sure that there's not too much water in the room, because we are watching none other than The Cell.
Yes.
That's right. The film from, a decade and a half ago that shows the acting chops of Vince Vaughn and Jennifer Lopez, and I think it
Vincent
does it
D'Onofrio.
well.
How could you forget Vincent
That's right.
D'Onofrio?
I know. I'm so sorry. As much as I love Law and Order too, that's terrible. Um, all of them do a great job in the movie. Before we get too much into the film, lots and lots of triggers. So we've got to let you guys know: child abuse, mental health issues, experimental medical procedures. What else?
Ooh, captivity, being held in a tight space.
If you have a fear of water.
Yes, drowning, a fear of water, body mutilation,
Serial killer.
Yes, consensual
Blood.
body mutilation, what he does to himself, but then not what he does to his victims. It's not consensual.
Absolutely. And I would also venture to say animal abuse, but in a very unusual form. Just because I think with the albino shepherd, beautiful animal, by the way, it's trained by its owner to behave in certain ways. But, you know, when we have pets and we train them, it's in our own accordance. So from the outside perspective, this animal's probably not being exposed to or taught the most ideal ways to behave, but it's only in very specific scenarios.
Yes. And the horse.
Yes.
The horse scene. Yeah.
What is up with that? Like, The Cell, the remake of The Crow, there's like always some freaking horse scene. Yeah. And I guess it kind of makes sense. We associate horses with being wild and running free. Right? So to damage that sort of animal in a film kind of represents our freedom being stripped away and demeaned. So I guess that would be kind of why they did it. So where should we start? Should we start with the premise of the film, or?
Yeah, we can. So listeners, viewers, if you haven't watched it, go watch it or prepare yourself for spoilers. Anna and I were just talking. We both agree this movie has aged well. It was a movie we both saw early on when it first came out, and then 15 years later, it's a very visually stunning and provoking movie. This movie really is telling its story through visuals, and I love that it was able to capture the absurdness often and the fantastical that we have in our dreams. Even that like nonsensical, when you wake up from a dream and you're like, what? None of that even made sense. How did I do that? How is that even possible? This movie is really able to capture the dreamscape of what's happening.
Absolutely. And I love that, like, the art director did a great job. So did the costume designer. It was a visual feast for the eyes, especially as you mentioned in a lot of the subconscious and dreamscape environments. There was always something to look at, always something to almost experience alongside the character. And I really think that I was easily brought into the world of some of these characters, and oftentimes that's very difficult for a film to do, at least for me. I'm like, okay, I'm watching something, whatever, but it really engulfed me in terms of being surrounded by their worlds.
Yes. Oh, I completely agree with you. Talk about visually stunning. I don't know about you, but for me, the scene where Vincent D'Onofrio, so viewers, listeners, Vincent D'Onofrio is a serial killer. He has a seizure, which makes him unconscious. They're looking for his last victim to save her before she dies. Jennifer Lopez is part of this new technology where she can go into somebody's subconscious, into their dream world. So she goes into Vincent D'Onofrio's dream world. And that one where he's like standing there and he has like the red like fabric connected to him, but you think it's actually like the fabric like on the wall. So then when he starts walking, like he's going forward and the fabric's like moving backwards. For me, I was like, that just like popped out to me.
Yes,
A lot of it
absolutely.
did.
Yeah, it really, and it's just, it's a beautiful, it really is gorgeous. I can remember, oh gosh, being a kid, well, I guess like adolescent age. And one of my friends saw it and he's like, you don't want to see the cell because an animal gets hurt, but you do want to see it because you're going to love all the artsy stuff. And it's absolutely right. It's just, it really is a feast for the eyes. I think that just the way that the color is used, not just in the subconscious world, but also when you compare that to his victims, right? Because he bleaches the bodies before he dumps them, devoid of any sort of prismatic element. Yet in his mind is just this grandeur and this beauty and this rainbow of everything.
Yes. And I love how you touch on like his dream to like reality. And we could see, so again, there's child abuse in this film and how his dad drained the color from him. He is a queer boy. The movie alludes to, right, that he's a queer boy and his dad essentially wants to beat that out of him and the trauma. So then he can't be who he wants to be. So he has this elaborate dream world where he is grandeur, where dad can't get to him. He cannot be punished for liking to play with dolls. And maybe he wasn't queer and he's heteronormative and he still liked to play with dolls. Either way, he got the message that who he was needed to be void of life. His life was unimportant.
Yeah, he had, and let's say he just, I think it's clear to say he had an appreciation for beauty, but maybe his own perspective of beauty. For me, one of the hardest scenes, which I did not watch the director's cut because I knew a friend of mine had seen that. I knew that was just not, I wasn't going to be able to finish. But when the dad has him in the family room and he like opens this woman's robe and he's like, look at this. And it's just, to me, it's just so upsetting. And I think we all know, like at this point, I don't like to see children get abused or hurt. That's just not my favorite thing to see in
It's
film.
hard.
Yeah, it is really hard because we know that these things happen in reality. And for me, that really makes me question, like, where were his teachers? Where were his family members? We know that the mom was gone. She left the family or was forced out, one or the other. I assume that the father probably had different partners in and out. Just that was kind of the vibe I was getting. So I'm like, he's going to school. What, he's obviously hurt. He has bruises. What are the teachers doing? Why aren't they doing anything? And it just felt like there were no adults to identify what was going on with this kid and to help him. And that was very heartbreaking. And I think that films in this arena are difficult for me too, because on one side you really empathize with his character, but then on the other side he grows up into this man who is doing these horrific things to people that he abducts, and it makes it very difficult to kind of decide how you feel about that character and at the end.
Yes, and I believe we've discussed this before, like a good film creator, a good movie writer, when a director and writer come together, a good film creates empathy for the person, for the character you don't want to have empathy for.
Yes.
And like you said, we do that scene where we have empathy for him. I had empathy for the woman who now, I kind of got the assumption that she was a prostitute, like the dad. He's very misogynistic, like, you're going to do this, and
yeah,
the woman and son, you are both gonna partake in this. And then as you're like, where were the people to care for him? Then we have J-Lo's character, who is that person that wants to come in. She wants to rescue the children. We see that with her one patient who is in a coma. Like, she's trying to be that safe person to bring him out, and that she does that. Like, she is that person for little Carl. And like, and that's part of, like, in trauma work, if anybody's listening and you have trauma, part of it is going back and giving that child that safe person, that person to say, I've got you, we're going to get through this. Because that's part of what happens with trauma. We don't have somebody that's going to advocate for us. We don't have the teachers, the doctors, the J-Los to be like, come on. And I think it was beautiful how she's, and scary, terrifying. She's like, I said I wasn't going to leave him. And then the movie shows you can't save everybody. Even little kid him knows that in order for him to be okay, adult him is going to have to die, that he can't survive without adult him.
Absolutely. And I think that the movie also speaks to those of us really in a variety of professions, how involved we get with our work and our clients, our colleagues, all of these different aspects. And when you're making a decision, do I continue with this client? It's going to benefit them, but is it really benefiting me? Is it benefiting the organization? Is this really what we want the future to look like on all aspects of the plane? And I think that that's an issue everyone has faced. I know in the industries that I've worked in, you know, even now, I don't just make decisions based on, okay, well, what's good for me? I try to think about the whole, um, as well as the individual. What about you, Margaret? Do you find that throughout your professional experience that that's been something that you've had to be considerate of as well, and just kind of evaluate?
Well, yeah, I think a lot of us, like you're saying, are thinking about what is good for everybody and what is in everybody's best interest. As a therapist, it's what is in the client's best interest. My best interest is not important at that point because I'm with somebody. In life, then what's in my best interest, and is it aligning with somebody else's best interest? And if it's not in somebody else's best interest, making sure that I'm not doing any harm. I'm not hurting myself, I'm not hurting the other person. So then, right, and we can even say maybe Anna loves basketball. She really wants to go to a basketball game, and I don't like big crowds. And so then I force myself to something that's not in my best interest, and then maybe Anna and I don't have a good time. And I can say, you know what, it's not for me. And then that's fine. If Anna's asking me to kill somebody with her, then that would be like, okay, that's in neither one of our best interests. And how do we go about doing that? So it's really interesting.
Absolutely. And I think also, you know, I'm going to say our pseudo antagonist, because I really feel like the father in the memories is the true antagonist in the film. But I mean, we do have to acknowledge that we have a serial killer as well. I feel like something that, you know, when we're looking at different sides of a scenario, you know, we do have, and I found this to be very challenging as well. We've got, you know, this knowledge about his childhood and his life experience, and we see how he orchestrates this plan to, you know, abduct young women, torture them, kill them in a very slow, panic inducing way. I mean, essentially he's drowning them. move the body, do additional things to the body that he derives some sort of pleasure from. I mean, that's very clear. And then dump them. So, for me, it's like, holy smokes, if he wouldn't have died, I think that him dying was kind of the best end for him in the movie. Because if it wouldn't, then okay, he would have went to court, and then the defense would have been, well, he had this horrible childhood. But the prosecution would have been like, yes, but he killed all these people and he derived pleasure from it. And so that's kind of that whole, once again, because not this exact scenario, but this does happen in reality, right? And I think it's very challenging. The court of public opinion versus the eyes of the law. We've talked about this before. They're two very different things. And I always find that to be challenging when I'm watching a film, because once again, on one hand, you really want to empathize with this character, and on the other hand, how can you? And I think it's just very introspective also when you think about that. Once again, I just hands off to the writer, director, and all of the actors. Anyone who worked on this film, if you're listening to this, great job.
Yes, and you bring up such a valuable point about he's a serial killer and how hard it is for us humans. We want either he's a good person or he's a bad person, and this film is like he has so much trauma. And there is a wounded child inside of him. We all have wounded children inside of all of us. And then saying, I can have empathy for little you. I can have empathy for you and all you've gone through. And it's still not okay to hurt people. It's not okay to murder people. And you need to be held accountable for what you've done. It's like holding that when we want horrible people do horrible things. Most often in life, hurt people do horrible things. And how do we hold people accountable and still be like, okay, you had a horrible childhood. That's awful. A lot of people have horrible childhoods and they don't go around killing people. They don't kidnap women and drown them.
Exactly. Well, and it makes me think, I recently came across a couple of quotes, and one of them is to the effect of, as adults, we become the people that we would have wanted to protect us when we were children. And then the other quote is that we connect with others subconsciously through our own trauma bonds. So Jennifer Lopez's character, it makes me wonder, had she experienced some form of abuse as a child, right? Because she's so concerned and involved with her clients and helping these children. Is that her way of making meaning out of her own personal trauma or grief journey?
Yes. I agree. Like, and those quotes were wonderful. And you're also talking about judgment, and you bring up J-Lo's character, the judgment she gets by Vince Vaughn and his partner at the end. Oh, she kept the dog. That's weird. I was thinking, of course she kept the dog. She was in his psyche. She was trying to save little him. The dog is a representation of a little him, saving little him. And again, the dog did nothing wrong. And so often how we judge people, oh, that's weird, you have a serial killer's dog. She experienced a lot. She connected with little him. She didn't connect with adult him.
Exactly. Well, and when you think about it too, the dog is in the room when she's going into his psyche. The dog is experiencing that with both of them, because studies have often proved how sensitive animals are to the central nervous system of humans that they bond with. And it seems that really from her first interaction with this dog, there was some sort of bonding. So not only is the dog concerned with him, it's also concerned with her.
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And it's interesting too that he purposely selected an albino dog Because if we look, the bleaching and then albino, also that it's unusual. So I think it touches on childhood him being, fascinated by things that maybe were unusual and not associated with how, and at that time it looked like he grew up in the 60s or 70s, so how a masculine identifying child should behave. And then also, once again, as an adult, he selects a pet that's devoid of color.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that movie is a lot about like color versus not color. Even looking at his home, it's depressed, it's lacking. Like he is punishing himself. And even the albino dog, the white dog, we could say purity. So perhaps the dog was what was still good in him, the purity of him, the child in him, because the dog is white. And we can see that later on when J-Lo takes on the religious imagery to help save him. It's white and bright, and it's that this is the good, this is the purity, this is how you're gonna be okay. Even the first boy that has her ride in on a white horse.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and another thing, and I'm curious to know your thoughts on the female bodybuilder when she's in his imagination. And to me, I was like, she runs out and she grabs J-Lo's character. So here's this visually strong, feminine facing female archetype person who's helping get him what he feels he needs. And I thought that was very clever because it's so interrelated to the fact that his mother was not in the picture as a child.
Yes. Oh, I completely agree that is his mother archetype, a strong woman that's going to give him what he needs. I also wondered if part of him wanted to be that strong female bodybuilder and he couldn't be that person. So then he's holding both the mother he wanted and the person he wanted to be.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that there are so many, once again, so many layers to the movie, so many layers to his mind. I mean, just the menagerie of broken dolls, I guess you could say. It kind of reminded me a little bit of Spalding from American Horror Story, very, very slightly. But it was just, I loved how damaged but beautiful each doll in the menagerie was.
Yes. Oh, yeah. That was, again, this rich, beautiful symbolism.
And I'm wondering if each doll was supposed to represent each of his victims and what drew him, because we don't really learn a lot about the victims. We just see very brief snippets, but maybe each one's quote unquote defect is what drew him to them.
Ooh, excellent point. Yeah, because it doesn't tell us like why he's picking them.
Yeah. And I do have to say though, when the FBI is like at the victim that they're looking for, the mother's house, I feel like she should have a very normal grief reaction. And I know it's a movie, but I was like, I feel like she'd be more upset. It just was like, well, maybe she's just very calm. But once again, it was a movie of the time. I think that the topic itself was very difficult. And I think if the movie would have been done now, she probably would have been much more expressive in her behavior. But once again, though, she may have been in complete shock too, because hearing that, your child has been abducted and is probably going to be found after these horrific experiences is very startling.
So she could be in shock. I also, as you're like, why did he pick his victims? Maybe he picked victims that had absent mothers and her mother was emotionally absent. Like, we don't know. As you're like, okay, she
Yeah.
could be in shock. This could be a very normal grief response, and it's not what we would expect when somebody, or she doesn't want to believe that her daughter is the victim of this guy. We don't know, because that was a very, you're right, it was like very interesting.
Kind of like, oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, so hey, I've got to ask, in the film, which character do you most relate to and why?
Great question. Also, I have a question for you. I think I'm gonna go with, I love J-Lo's character. I could see myself doing that, but I'm gonna go with the other doctor, the one that is supporting J-Lo. How about you?
I would say the dog. Um, just, I think because for me, it's more of, you know, I'm in an environment. I'm doing what I'm conditioned and told to do, you know, in terms of what I've been taught, but I still have the capability of changing my way of thinking, right? Because we know that the dog was trained one way by our pseudo antagonist, and then our protagonist ends up with the dog, and there are changes in behavior we will assume. So I think that the dog is more human than maybe some of the people characters in the movie, just because, you know, I'm one way, I behave this way because of this, but I can still change my mind and change my behavior.
Yes. Ooh, great answer. I also want to ask you, would
Mhm.
you go into somebody's dream if we had the technology, or into their psyche? And would you allow somebody else into your psyche?
That's a very good question, and I will honestly say it depends on the person. I can't really give a definitive yes or no, because I think it would depend on the situation as well as the parties involved.
Yes.
What about you?
I think if that technology was available
Mhm.
as a therapist who works with trauma, yes, I would go in. I would be in there with them. The other way, like you, who is wanting into my psyche and why are they wanting in my psyche? And it's going to have to be somebody that I trust into my psyche.
Yeah. Well, and you know, the only one I allow in my dreams is Freddy Krueger. As of right now, today, this moment. But I think some of it too, the spiritual aspect, right? A lot of different cultures and groups and even religions have very strong beliefs that if you dream of someone that's significant to you, to your life, to the role of that person in your life, and there are a lot of other things associated with that. And for me, just in terms of the spiritual realm, should we really be willing to let someone infiltrate that layer, right? Because what happens if and yes, I am into the metaphysical. I believe in astral projection and all those things, of course I do. But you know, what happens if that we do have that technology and we are able to share our subconscious and our dreams? Is that going to hinder if someone has natural psychic communication abilities, or someone astral projects, or all these other phenomena that we can't really explain that happen to people?
Ooh, thank you. I really appreciate that answer. I think for me, the technology would have to be used under consent, like we see. Well,
Yeah.
he's not giving consent in the movie. The little boy's parents give consent under consent.
Hmm.
Like, when somebody shows up
Yeah.
for a therapy session, they're giving consent. We're doing something. I would want something structured like that. We are going into your psyche to work on this, to do this thing. I wouldn't want people just willy-nilly popping in, as like, as you talk about psychics, astro
Hmm.
projection, like that can be unnerving to somebody. Like, astro projects into your
Hmm.
dream and then you wake up unsettled because something in that dream felt
Yeah.
off.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the other thing too is, like if someone, is a paranormal investigator and there are reports of something that stays with them after each investigation or something like that, then if you're going into someone's subconscious or their dreams, does part of that stay with you? And I think that would be worth exploring as well, should that technology or option become available, because it really opens doors to greater understanding, but we need to know what the consequences of opening those doors could potentially be as well, not just the benefits.
And if like you touch on modern society's disconnect, a lot of us have ancestors that came from cultures that had practices where energetically you're cleaning your energy. So if you were to go into somebody's dream when you come out, you're doing what you need to do to separate your energies. Paranormal investigators, we don't see them do that. What are their psychic hygiene practices? How are they making sure that wherever they went stays there, and they have them? And you also touch on, as people, so often, like, yes, we exchange energies, but people leave little parts of themselves with us.
Yeah.
And often we're choosing those parts that stay with us. So
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate how you're like, where does that choice happen if we're just doing this? To be like, I'm choosing this memory, I'm choosing this part of this person, and not, oh, I have what they left behind because they intruded into my space.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's very fun to think about, and a little wild to think about too.
Mhm.
But and then going back when we were talking about just childhood experiences and what drives us as adults, if you're listening to this and you or someone you know is experiencing trauma due to previous experiences in their childhood, if they're having a difficult time dealing with childhood trauma, anything of that nature, particularly if there are feelings of self-harm or harming others, please reach out to supports and services that can help you. They are available. I know I sound like a broken record, but if you are in a position where you're concerned that you may harm yourself or someone else, please call 988. Please go to a walk-in clinic that can help you and provide supports and services that will help you navigate through what you're experiencing.
Yes, thank you for reminding our viewers and listeners that there are supports out there for them, and for them, encouraging them to reach out. One other thing, this movie is from 2000, and it is the time when mental health gets blamed for everything. And so they make up
Yes.
some sort of form of schizophrenia that doesn't exist.
It
Which
doesn't.
it bothers me that movies in the 2000s
Mm-hmm.
felt like they needed to blame mental health and
Right.
couldn't just say, okay, these are the complexities of life. And people have
Mm-hmm.
trauma, and some people with trauma end up doing horrible things. Some people with trauma end up not doing horrible things. Some people
Yeah.
without trauma end up doing horrible things. And to
Mm-hmm.
normalize that this is a life, and we don't need to blame
Yeah.
mental illness for somebody's already tragic life that led them to be a horrible person.
Absolutely. And I think also the term mental health, that's not walking hand in hand with mental illness. Everyone has to take care of their mental health.
Yeah.
Um, you need to ensure that you are processing things that are in a healthy, beneficial way for yourself. That's each individual's duty. That is something that we owe ourselves. We don't owe it to anyone else. We owe it to ourselves, right? Because everyone's story is first person. We're navigating and narrating our own
Mhm.
lives. So we have to try and make sure that we're in a healthy space. I wouldn't say a positive space all the time, because no one's
Yeah.
happy all the time. That's not realistic, but we do have to check in on our mental health and what we're experiencing, what we're feeling, what may be causing those feelings or our actions or behaviors. It's very important.
Yes. Agreed.
Yes. And also, yes, you're absolutely right about the made up medical condition. I thought he had an aneurysm, which is why he was out. I was like, oh, he must have had an aneurysm. No.
No. See, I looked it up. I was like, they made up some form of schizophrenia for this movie. An aneurysm would have been fine. Or sometimes people do bad things. It's part of life. We don't need to blame something and then stigmatize a group of people to make our story better.
Absolutely.
And when we add anything, I don't think it did to the story.
No, not at all. I think it just kind of, I feel like, you know, it, in the 2010s, like bipolar was kind of like the buzzword. Everyone was bipolar, whether you were insulting someone or trying to diagnose yourself or whatever it was, that was the buzzword. And I feel like maybe in the early 2000s at that time, maybe the schizophrenia was kind of becoming a buzzword as well. But yeah, and I think too, just we talk about how good people do bad things, bad people do good things. You know, good people do good things, bad people do bad things, those sorts of things. When we talk about human behavior and actions, we're not trying to normalize tragic, traumatic things that happen. We're just trying to be realistic and say that these things do happen. They will continue to happen, and really encourage those impacted by those sorts of incidents and behavior to seek help that will assist them in navigating through their own journey. So anyone who's listening, please don't think we're trying to normalize or support what is considered to be negative behavior by any means. We're trying to provide support to those impacted by those sorts of behaviors so that they can live the best lives possible.
Yes. Thank you for clarifying. Would you say that we're trying to normalize that life is complex? People are complex, and in that is a bunch of complexity, and that's what we're trying to normalize is, yeah, life is complex and comes with a lot. It's not black or white or this or that. It's
one big gray area. Yeah. I mean, it really is. And it's important to know that whatever you're going through, you're not alone. There are people out there to help you, that want to help you, that want you to succeed. Don't ever feel like you're not a whole person, because none of us are completely fully whole. I think that from my perspective, part of the entire point of us being here is to continue to evolve and change and try to better ourselves through our experiences, and maybe even if we're lucky, help someone else better themselves through sharing our experiences and providing support to other people if we're in a position to.
Yes.
Yes. Exactly. People helpers unite. And if you're a person that feels you need help, you know, there are people out there that want to help you. So it's really, it's a great thing. It's a wonderful thing. Definitely, if you have not seen this movie, check it out. If you have seen it, let us know your thoughts. Hit us with a couple comments on how you felt when you first watched it, and maybe your perspective on the film now that you've listened to us talk about it. Also, if you're into psychological thrillers or, you know, films that are very similar to The Cell, let us know if there's anything you want us to watch and talk about. We're more than happy to.
Yes. Please.
Yes. And then until next time, don't forget.
Like, subscribe, follow, comment.
Yes, please. And drink your Bruja Brew and eat your coffin cookies. We will see you on the next episode.
Yes. Thanks for watching and listening.